Hey everybody, and welcome to this, I guess, kind of ramble video. Um, uh, a few months ago, well, 7 actually, I did a video you can just see here. We'll click on it, but I'll just cut the sound because otherwise it'll play. Well, so I did a 2019 guide to a streaming PC where we chatted a little bit about kind of what you need in a streaming PC, kind of what's going on. But obviously in the last 7 months, like the PC kind of, or even just the whole gaming kind of environment has changed a lot. We've had new hardware released left, right, and center from AMD, from Nvidia, from Intel. We've seen consoles come into their kind of final form, if you like, their final generation until the final version, I guess, until the new generation next year. And I thought we'd have just a chat ramble, if you like, about what your money gets you nowadays and what it is, because I firmly believe 100% that right now is the best we have ever had it in terms of gaming. A lot of people sometimes like to moan about things, but genuinely, like right this second, right this minute, we have such a healthy, like competitive ecosystem that it's unreal. And I'm talking about consoles and PCs. Let's talk about consoles to begin with, because we'll chat for a long time about PC, not so long about consoles, because for me anyway, the PC is obviously the king. But we'll talk about that and why I think that anyway. So how much can you get a console for nowadays? So you can pick up the Xbox 1 terabyte all digital. So in other words, it doesn't have a disk drive. So for £191, prices will vary, obviously. Compared to wherever you're from, wherever you live. But in the UK right now on Amazon, the cheapest price you're getting is £191 with your free delivery. That is so cheap. I know £191 to some people is a heck of a lot of money. So I'm not saying like that is no money, but what I'm saying is the value you get for that money is ridiculously good. When you combine that with the Xbox Game Pass, which gives you access to so many games, 3-month one will cost you, that's ultimate actually, to be fair, so you just need the normal one, 23.99. 6 months, it's 50 quid. You might be saying that's quite a lot, but you get a lot for your money there. Like you can see there are over 100 great games. There's more than that nowadays. Ultimate one actually gives you Windows games as well, so you can kind of combine the both, but there's so many brilliant games on there. You can see just some of them. Well, you can't really, but Forza, you can have the new Gears of War, State of Decay, Tomb Raider, Halo, Crackdown, Elder Scrolls, everything like is on there, and there's so many great free games out. People have been moaning things like Fortnite, etc., Apex Legends, but they're really good fun games, and you can have a lot of great fun for those games. So £191, or you could argue and go for the £230 one with the disc drive, and then you could technically buy some used games. Might save you the 40 quid difference along the line, but I'm not sure it would, because as I said, if you got the Xbox, the Game Pass, you're getting a lot of those older games in there. So personally, I'd go for the digital ones, as long as obviously you have decent internet. That is something to consider. But yeah, 1 terabyte as well, decent size. You can get a lot of games on there. You get your controller with it and everything, and you're ready to go. No problems. Just plug it in, probably do a little bit of an update, and then you'll be playing games. Once you've downloaded them. Simple. PlayStation 4 nowadays is going to set you back, so what, 230 just for the PlayStation. They don't have as good a thing as the Game Pass anymore. You could argue and get something like the £270 one with The Last of Us, Uncharted and Horizon. Some decent games there. 250 with Red Dead. I don't think you get. I think if somebody was saying to me right now, I want to buy, my nephew or my kids or somebody a games console, what would you recommend right now? I would actually recommend they go for the Xbox One, because the generation is coming towards an end. If you wanted to, you'd be spending a lot more money on a PlayStation. As I said, you can get the Xbox and you can give them a Game Pass for 3 months, 6 months or whatever, and they have access to hundreds of games they can play. Sure, you might not be getting the latest and greatest. You might not, well, you're getting quite a few decent games in the Game Pass, but the real kind of big ones, you might not get some of the really good exclusives you can get on PlayStation nowadays. But you are just getting a wide range. So I would recommend the PlayStation, the Xbox over the PlayStation. But that's just because we're kind of coming to that generational end where the problem you have now is if you're buying one of these consoles now, then in a year's time, that console will not be the latest and greatest. It's quite likely that by next Christmas, we will have the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox, whatever it is they call it. What is it? The Project Scarlet, I think it is, but that probably won't be its final name. And those consoles will obviously be the latest and greatest, and from what people are saying, there's some pretty decent specs that are coming in those games, but we'll talk about that a bit more when we talk about the PC, because realistically there's no PC that can match the value that you get from an Xbox One S or a PlayStation 4 right now, because they are so much cheaper than you would ever find your Xbox. They're so much cheaper than you could ever find a PC which could do the equivalent things. It just wouldn't happen. For £190, I mean, you wouldn't even get a CPU and a motherboard. So, let alone a graphics card and all the rest of it. We'll go through that in a bit anyway. But yeah, so consoles right now, as I said, we're in a great place, especially with Xbox, giving that great value. I kind of almost see Xbox and PlayStation similar to like Nvidia and AMD. So the way it kind of works a little bit in the graphics card sector is at the slightly lower end, AMD is king compared to Nvidia. They just offer so much more value, for very similar performance. It's unreal. That combined with FreeSync compared to G-Sync, which we'll go into, is a no-brainer almost. So I see them as the kind of the Xbox, and then PlayStation are more like Nvidia, where it's a bit higher end. You're paying a bit more money for it, but the quality is a little bit better, especially on the game side of thing as well. In all honesty, the exclusives on PlayStation are very, very good. That doesn't quite work out, I guess, for the, shall we say, the quote-unquote Pro version or 4K versions of the respective consoles. So you can see $329 gets you a PlayStation 4 Pro. I think the Xbox One X is $376, so about £50 more without a game. You can get limited edition ones going into the 400s here. Yeah, 400 there for that one, but 376, and they are ones which, I mean, the Xbox One X is definitely more powerful than a PlayStation 4 Pro without a doubt, and very, very decent solid console. However, I'll say something now which some people might disagree with me on. Neither of these consoles are, in my opinion, 4K consoles. Yes, they can output resolution that is 4K, but there's a big difference between the resolution of a game and how good a game looks. Resolution is the number of pixels you have on the screen. So, 1080p, 1440p, 2160p, or your 4K, 2K, 1080p. or HD actually, sorry, not 1080p, HD. Um, they're they're just about the number of pixels. It doesn't necessarily mean that what those pixels are showing is great. So PC graphically has so many more options, and so it does so many more things than these consoles can do, that sometimes, I'd actually say the majority of times, like a 1080p Ultra on a PC would look better than an Xbox or PlayStation at 4K. I know that might some people might be getting out of their chairs right now and shaking their fist at the TV, but it's generally true. And the reason why I say that's true is actually not necessarily an elitist thing, but generally when you play your Xbox One X or your PlayStation 4 Pro, you're playing on a big 4K TV. When you're playing a 1080p PC, a lot of the time people are playing it on monitors which are smaller, so the actual bump in resolution doesn't actually matter, really, because you may have less pixels on screen, but it's a smaller screen, so you're not really noticing it as much. That's why sometimes like 4K screens can be wasted if you have them on anything less than maybe like a 32-inch screen, because it's a little bit overkill. As somebody who owned a 4K 27-inch monitor and now runs a 2K 32-inch monitor, I can't really tell much difference, I'll be honest with you. If I really get close to it, then yeah, absolutely. But otherwise, it's not that much noticeable. What is noticeable is frame rates, definitely, and that's something we'll talk about with PC as well. So yeah, I would argue that in terms of kind of like graphically, and if you're really into kind of graphics and stuff like that, like 4K as a resolution can look amazing. It really can. So like crisp compared to 1080p, but I don't feel like sometimes it's worth the trade-off of the certain effects and things like that you lose, or the frame rates you lose, compared to 1080p or 1440p if you splash out a bit more on your PC. So it'll be interesting to see what the next generation of consoles bring, whether they can give higher frame rates. I doubt it. They could go to 60 because most TVs will do 60, but they won't go higher than that because primarily console gamers play on big TVs, which have a maximum frame per second of 60, so it doesn't make sense for them to go higher than that in games. But it would be nice for them to at least hit 60 most of the time. A lot of the time in games are capped out at 30, and it's not a great experience. And it'd be interesting to see with other effects and things like that we have. I mean, the big one we have at the minute on PC is ray tracing. That's obviously a very high end. There are rumours that the next consoles will be able to do some ray tracing. We'll see. The other thing to consider is there are different variations of ray tracing. Not all ray tracing is equal. So, we'll see how that comes about. As I said, I'm not a particular, bona fide PC master race guy. Consoles are fantastic. You plug them in, you play. They offer fantastic value for money currently, and they're a great experience. I play most of my games with a Xbox controller because I just prefer that experience to keyboard and mouse. So I love console gaming. I grew up on console gaming more than PC, but PC gaming, in terms of a kind of graphical point of view, in terms of a frame rate point of view, consoles aren't anywhere near as close to that. So some of the things I kind of had a look at and thought we would look at, if we're comparing it to consoles, is a budget build. Now, realistically, you're not going to get anything below, if you're buying new anyway, you're not really going to get anything below £500 to £600 on PC. So, if you're looking at something which is taking on, an Xbox One S, which was £200, like obviously there's a much higher premium to pay for a PC, which will be an issue for some. but you have to look into the the added stuff you can do on a PC. You can't do your homework on an Xbox. I know it sounds kind of strange, but like PCs have a lot of uses outside of actually playing games, funnily enough. Content creation is obviously a really big deal for people nowadays. Even if they have, if they just enjoy editing photos or things like that, to, making videos, to, I don't know, art stuff, to other things like using your Excel and Word and stuff like that. There's loads of things you can do on PC that you obviously can't do on Xbox, so that added usage does add cost, as well as the fact that most consoles are actually sold at a loss because they want to make money off the games more than that. So you can never really beat a console on value for money. Like, it is just the number one, which is why I would always recommend that to somebody if they just wanted to play games. But you can get really good value nowadays, thanks to lots of new hardware, high-end hardware kind of coming in, which then reduces the cost of the lower end stuff. Meaning we now have some really good like PCs available for the £500 to £600 kind of market, I guess. So what can you get? I've kind of made my own one. I've had a look on PC Gamer. They've got a budget build as well, and also on Games Radar they have a budget builder here as well. So I thought they're all different in a way. So I thought we would have a look at it and kind of see through and have a look at what we want. Now, what are you going to be getting at this kind of value, £500 to £600 on your PC? So it kind of depends where you're going. The PC Gamer build here has an Intel Core i3 8100, has a Radeon RX 580 8GB graphics card, a Z370 Pro motherboard, 8GB of RAM, a 500GB SSD, 450 watt PSU, and 46 pound case. Obviously prices can vary wildly. This is just what we're going with now. This is about 500 odd pounds or so. What this doesn't include is Microsoft Windows, which could set you back like another 70 plus pounds, depending on whether you want to get one the honest way or not. Which is why we don't usually include that in here, because often people might have a copy of Windows, like a key, or sometimes they can get one which has fallen off the back of a lorry in some ways. I obviously don't condone that. I haven't actually ever done that myself, and a lot of people can get scammed with keys and things like that, so you have to be careful. But some people do that. So the i3 8100, if we actually kind of go there, they'll explain a little about it. So what they're saying is it keeps up with the Radeon 580. So one of the important things about your PC is you have your CPU, which is your processor, and you have your GPU, which is your graphics card. Sometimes you can have a really powerful graphics card and a not so good CPU, and you actually will bottleneck or throttle the ability that your graphics card could have because your CPU can't keep up with it, and vice versa. You can have a really powerful CPU but not a great graphics card, and then you won't be getting the best out of everything. So you want to have something which is fairly equal, or maybe you're looking at upgrading in the future, so one might be slightly stronger than the other, but you don't mind that right now. So this keeps up with it. It only has 4 cores. Without wanting to go down the really what would be the word, really like in-depth kind of thing, essentially cores don't matter that much to gaming. They matter more to content creation, or doing complex stuff on your computer through different programs. Gaming wise, most of your stuff is handled by the GPU, with a little bit on the CPU, depending on what games you have. Some games are more dependent than others. So the 4 core wise, from a gaming point of view, wouldn't matter too much. So yeah, they're saying here there's some other options you could go for. You can yeah, they're saying kind of like you could go slightly up, or you could go for an i5 8400 or an i3 8350K, which is overclockable, but then you push the prices like right up. And you also have the option of an AMD processor, which would be a little bit more expensive, but would probably be a lot better on the content creation side of things than the i3. But the i3 is very good value. It's good processor on there. The one bad thing about Intel, well, not really bad, but what Intel doesn't generally do is they don't include a CPU cooler in there, so that will cost you like another 30 quid or so to just get something like that Hyper X212. Something pretty simple. It wouldn't be getting too hot that you would need anything fancy to cool it anyway. You could go really cheaper than that, to be fair, and it wouldn't matter that much on there. So yeah, they've gone for an i3. The AMD card, the RX 580 8GB. I think all the builds went for an RX 580. Yeah, that one did. My one did, because it's just really solid, really solid card for 1080p gaming, which is what we're looking at here. So this is an important kind of thing. What are you getting for that £500 to £600? You're getting something which is going to be able to play 1080p at high to ultra settings at 60 frames per second on pretty much all modern games that you're looking at here, which, as I said before, if you're playing on a decent 1080p monitor, like something with an IPS screen, something like that, you're going to be getting really good quality from that. You can see the average is over 60 frames per second at 1080p maximum quality. There are a few games where you might need to just tweak it a little touch, something like Assassin's Creed Odyssey or something like that. You might need to tweak a little thing to keep it up there at 60, but there you can do that. And certainly for the games which aren't kind of graphical powerhouses, so the first person shooters like say an Overwatch or Apex Legends or Fortnite, you can get more out of them than that. So if you even had a higher monitor refresh rate, which would allow you to go higher than 60 frames per second, then you could do that as well potentially if you tweaked a few bits and bobs, because a lot of the time if you're really into first person shooters, the higher frame rate the better, generally, with that one. So you're getting a really good card there and fantastic value. The equivalent Nvidia card to get you that kind of level would be probably £100 more than that, like realistically, which is, people have their like preferences, and some people will swear by Nvidia, some people will swear by AMD, and that's how they'll live their life, the red or the green. Personally, I'll go where I think there's the best value. At the minute, AMD doesn't really have anything that can like rival Nvidia's high-end cards. I have a 2080 Super, and there's nothing AMD has got that is even close. But that comes at a premium price because there isn't the competition. So yeah, at the minute, AMD are really winning the performance. The price per performance kind of bracket. Which is great. Really good for consumers. We don't have. One of the things graphics cards can be very much linked to, especially AMD graphics cards, is crypto mining, so Bitcoin, etc. At the minute, that isn't a massive craze. When it was a craze, you would see prices double that for the same card. So thankfully, that craze has kind of gone away, and we've now got pretty standard prices for cards and things like that. Motherboard wise, motherboards, I would always recommend like spending a decent amount on a motherboard. So maybe like £80 to £100, depending on what sort of deal you can get, because you don't want to go dirt cheap end, because motherboards essentially, I look at them as your kind of like the veins in your body, really. Like they make sure everything gets to where it should be going to. You know, the blood. They make sure the blood gets round. You know, you don't want to have a crappy motherboard because all your other parts are not going to be working properly. But at the other end of it, you don't need to have a £400 motherboard. Like, you're not going to notice unless you're at that exceptionally high end, like marginal gains level. It's not going to make too much difference. In this particular one, you have 6 SATA ports, which would be where you would plug in your SSDs. One M.2 SSD drive port, which would be fine. Doesn't have Wi-Fi, which might bother some people, but Wi-Fi, to add in a little Wi-Fi card would generally cost you about £25. You can get them cheaper than that depending on what you want. And yeah, and otherwise it would do everything on the box. Nothing fancy there, but fairly decent. RAM as well. So they go for 8 gigabytes of RAM here. I would actually technically argue that 8 might not be enough right now. They're saying it's plenty for most games. I think we're getting to a point now where a lot of games are recommending 16. The one thing you can get away with here, like this RAM is dirt cheap. 40 quid for some DDR4 RAM is cheap. And the reason being that Intel processors are not that affected by RAM speed in particular, whereas AMD is. Faster speed RAM, the more expensive it gets. So you would add on maybe another £10 if you wanted fast enough RAM to kind of keep up with an AMD card. So Nvidia can save you a little bit of money on RAM, but it's not really that much in the scheme of things. SSDs as well, they've gone for a 500 gigabyte Crucial here, which is absolutely fine. No problems there. 500 gigabytes would be enough. Windows usually takes up around 100 or so, maybe 70 to 100 gigabytes. So it leaves you with about 400 gigabytes for your games, your programs, you know, media, stuff like that, which is absolutely fine, honestly. You know, unless you're somebody who, for some weird reason, wants every single game downloaded. Maybe your internet's bad, actually, to be fair, so it's reasonable. You could buy a 1 terabyte hard drive to go with it, which would you know, be pretty decent, because modern games are, like real high-end modern games are usually about 100 gigabytes, so you're going to be able to have like 3 or 4 on there at a time, maybe 5 or 6 if you're not, or maybe 10 if you're not really into like the highest of high end. But yeah, it's something to bear in mind, I think. With it, you can get a mechanical hard drive, maybe a terabyte or so, for a similar price than that as well. Power supplies as well, I'd always recommend not skimping on a power supply, because your power supply, as the name suggests, powers everything, and if you do get a cheap one, then you're, you know, you run the risk of destroying the rest of your parts because you've skimped on a power supply. If you wonder what like the bronze and the gold and the platinums kind of are, this is a 80 plus bronze here. It's about efficiency, basically. That's it, really. I would always recommend buying a power supply new. Recommend as well getting a reputable brand. EVGA generally do pretty good ones as well. Corsair do good ones. Get something reputable. Look it up. You know, do some research, because as I said, you don't want to skimp on this one and buy some real cheapy one and end up blowing all your components, because, you know, after a year your power supply is just packed in, because that will cost you a lot of money at the end of the day. You know, if your graphics card goes, you just have to replace your graphics card. If your motherboard goes, you just replace your motherboard. You know, potentially if your power supply, you know, surges, it could kill everything in your PC. So, you know, if you buy a decent one, they'll last you a long time. I had a Corsair one before the one I had, and I think I had that for about 5 or 6 years, and it was totally fine. So yeah, you know, a good one will last. And then a case, which cases are completely down to what you want. Basically, you can buy one for £25, you can buy one for £200. They generally won't make any difference to the performance of your PC, other than maybe from a cooling point of view. So you want to make sure you have some decent fans in there. Ideally, you want to have a couple at the front and one at the back for exhaust. A lot of cases will come with enough fans. Some won't, so be careful. They're very cheap to buy, unless you want very fancy ones. Yeah, just make sure you're aware of what you're going for. And obviously from RGB and stuff like that can all add costs. I will say, like, RGB is a very personal thing, so it's a personal preference type thing. But also, I think sometimes, like, if you go down the route of getting everything which has got, you know, integrated RGB and stuff like that, and you know, all your fans link up and do everything like that, it can get really expensive. And actually, I think I bought just a strip off Amazon for like 10 quid or something like that, and it lights up my computer really nicely. And you don't necessarily need to have all these fancy patterns and things like that. You know, if you're on a budget, it's not going to make anything go faster. In actual fact, it could make things go slower if you know, skimp on the fans and get crappier fans or whatever, just because they light up. So that's the kind of PC gamer one. So that's about £500. So that, as I said, that would play everything nowadays, 1080p, 60 frames per second, you know, without any issues. You'd have an absolutely fine time, you know, doing, you know, web browsing, you know, using, you know, word processing documents, Word, Excel, things like that. Content creation wise, it'd be a bit slow. You only got 8 gigabytes of RAM. The i3 isn't ideal for that type of thing, but it's certainly, you know, doable. Like, not going to be painful or anything like that. Obviously, if you're doing really high-end stuff, you know, you're going to want something more powerful. But if you're like, yeah, I want to make a few YouTube videos, do a bit of editing in Adobe or in you know, Sony Vegas or whatever, it'll be fine. It'll be absolutely fine. Not going to be the quickest rendering or anything like that, but you know, that's what you would expect, basically, I think. So £500 generally gets you that. The Games Radar one that they recommend, very, very similar build. They actually went for 16 gigabytes of RAM, so the price difference there, you can see £75 for 16 gigabytes of the Corsair compared to that. Now, I'd be interested to know what speed that is actually. Let's have a look. It's 3000 megahertz actually, which is not bad. Ideally with a Ryzen you want maybe 3200 to 36. So they've actually gone for the AMD RX 580, which you just would, because that's what I went for. They've gone for an AMD Ryzen 5 2600. So the Zen 2 architecture AMD chips came out recently. Although confusingly they're actually referred to as like the 3600 and things like that, even though they're Zen 2. It's weird. So that's driven the price of the 2600 and, well, the previous generation Ryzen chips down. And £119 for a Ryzen 5 2600 is very, very good. Yeah, so that would be much, much better at content creation and stuff like that. Probably pretty much the same on a gaming level as the i3. In fact, you know, the prices they've got there, the i3 is a bit more. I think the i3 would be a little bit better from a gaming point of view, but as I said, most of your work is being done by the GPU, so I don't think you're going to bottleneck it really. Depends on the games you play mostly. If you have real set games that you're playing, you might want to build something slightly more dedicated towards that, but otherwise not too much of a problem. They've included the Cooler Master Hyper 212 Evo. I don't think the 2600 comes with the Wraith Spire cooler, but I'm not too sure. So they went for 16 gigabytes of RAM. They've gone for a 1 terabyte WD Blue. So they haven't got an SSD, but that's a fairly fast mechanical hard drive. So, you know, and to be fair, to buy a SSD with 240 gigs on it, which would be enough for Windows, and then a couple of your kind of main games, I guess, that you play would be the same price, about 30 quid you could get that for. It's not going to break the bank, is it, at the end of the day? If it's something you have to buy a little later down the line because you can't afford it right now, then you can do that, or you can wait for a deal. They've gone for the Tomahawk B450. It's a very decent motherboard. £95. I feel like you could go a little cheaper there, but again, it's, motherboards, I think, like, try and get the best value you can. You don't have to splash out massively, but you get what you pay for. There's more features, and better features on higher priced ones generally. So you can just do a bit of research and find something decent there. Got a Corsair power supply, 550 watts, decent enough, and a H500. So a fairly expensive case actually there. Now, this is about 550 this here. So, it's a little bit more expensive, but again, you do definitely get what you pay for. You could get a cheaper cooler than the 212, but the 212, the Hyper 212X is really, really good. I had one for many years, and it's very, very good. There's your 16 gigabytes of RAM. One thing I will say about these power supplies is they're not modular, so all your cables are connected. So you can pay a bit extra and get modular, but again, it's up to you what you want to do there and how tight your budget is. For example, and the case is pretty decent, the H500, and for a few quid more you can get the H500i. Adds built-in control for fans and RGB light and all that malarkey. If you're really into that type of stuff, you can go there. So again, pretty decent for like 550. And then you got my one, which is about 640. We went for a 580. Of course, 170. I've done this on overclockers. You could find it technically cheaper elsewhere, so I reckon you could get that down to about 600 if you really wanted to search for some deals. You got the Ryzen 5. I mean, they're saying the Ryzen 5 is like about 30 quid cheaper than that on other places, so you could have a look. But yeah, I went for the Ryzen 5 2600 as well. 16 gigabytes of RAM. 74, I think they had it. There's much less. 75 actually, so a bit more. I went for this interesting like Zalman tower because it comes with 4 fans which actually light up, which seems pretty good, and gives you quite a lot of kind of upgradable options in there as well. It's not going to be the greatest case on earth, but £42 is, for including 4 fans which light up, is pretty darn good. Probably wouldn't be the quietest fans on earth, so you have to kind of bear that in mind. But at the end of the day, it's going to do a really good job at keeping things cool in there. Looking fairly decent as well, I think. It's quite smart looking. Gives you quite a lot of functionality. And as I said, a case is something which is very much kind of personal preference, and it's fashion over function almost sometimes. I will say that getting a nice high-end case makes building a lot easier, and certainly cooling is something you should be thinking about. Although I will also say that if you're not using exceptionally high-end stuff, then keeping it cool isn't that much of an issue, because it's, they still will be pumping out heat, but it won't be quite as bad as if you're using like a i9 9900 or something like that. That will really pump out the heat there. So yeah, if we go back to our back to here, I included 2 drives actually. So we included a 1 terabyte WD Blue for all your content creating stuff, and a few games which are fine on a 7200 RPM hard disk drive, and then a 240 gigabyte SSD. As I said, you can get Windows on there, you can get your couple of your favorite games on there, and they'll play a little bit faster on there. It's important to note, like, SSDs are great from a quality of life point of view. They won't make anything run better. They won't be adding in frames per second, by the bucket load. What they will do is reduce load times, essentially, and certainly be better if you're doing a lot of content creation on there. So it's more quality of life stuff than actual adding numbers to your frames. There was an ASRock motherboard here, which had decent options on it, and then a Be Quiet power supply, 500 watt for 54 quid, and that's like 643 before delivery options, as I said. So I reckon you could shop around and get that to about 600 easily. So £500 to £600 gets you 1080p ultra for everything, a really good system. So if you're looking at that and going, well, sure, your Xbox, if you're looking at something going, your Xbox One X 1 terabyte console is 376, by the time you add in your Game Pass, you're looking at 400. It's 100 quid more, 100 to 200 pounds more, shall we say, for a PC, which will give you, firstly, and probably the primary thing, upgradability. If you're suddenly going, my games aren't quite hitting that marker I want them to hit, or I've upgraded my monitor and I want something to match it. Instead of turning around and being like, I've got to buy a whole new console now, you can sell your graphics card, buy a new one, slot it in, you're ready to go. Many a times, I haven't spent more than a few £100 on a graphics card in the last 10 years, because when I bought my very first graphics card, I sold it and then I bought my next one, a couple of £100 difference. Then a few years later I sold that graphics card, bought a new one, a couple of £100 difference. So upgrading isn't that much when you're actually selling the components to pay for a new one. You look at a graphics card that's like £700 and you go, wow, that's so expensive, but then you realize the one you have in your system is worth 400 to 500. So it's actually only a couple of £100 to upgrade, and it would be it could potentially be a really big upgrade for you. Might not potentially be as well, or you could look at it and go, okay, well, that RX 580, which is worth 160, 70 quid now, by the time you upgrade, that might be 100 quid, but you might be upgrading to a card which costs £200. So in reality, you're only spending £100 on your next graphics card. If you see what I'm saying from that point of view, that upgradability. Same with CPU and everything else, it can get expensive, especially when you have to replace a motherboard, as well, because of whatever. But actually they're getting a lot better at kind of backwards compatibility. Certainly Ryzen's very good at the backwards compatibility of motherboards, so not having to spend as much money on them nowadays as you used to. So upgradability is a big thing with PCs. PCs, you can play any game that came out on a PC in the last 20 years. You can't play Xbox games on an Xbox One X. So the original Xbox, that is. You can't play Xbox 360 games as such. I will say obviously they do have that kind of backwards compatibility coming out, but not every game. And certainly on PlayStation, they don't have it. So, PC always has backwards compatibility. Generally, anyway. It can be a bit of a pain to get some games to work. But generally, you can get them to work. So you kind of have that option. And as I said, the other things you can do on a PC, which you can't do on a console. So for me, that's why PC gaming will always be number one compared to the consoles. So yeah, I kind of hope this has given you guys like a bit to think about. As I said kind of before, I don't feel that what we've been sold at the minute in terms of 4K is 4K. Like you could turn around and buy a 4K monitor with one of these PCs here. You could pump the resolution up to 4K, turn everything down, turn all your settings right down, and you'd probably have the equivalent to what an Xbox One X does. It actually might even be a little bit better, and it would probably run at 30 frames per second, like a lot of Xbox One X like games will run at. That might be a little unfair on the Xbox One X. I think it is pretty good at getting a lot of things to 60, but the PlayStation 4 Pro isn't. I know that much, so you have to kind of bear that in mind. You do, of course, however, have that thing of the next generation of consoles is coming next year. What does that mean for PC gaming? A lot of people have said, oh, it could be the end for PC gaming. What you have to imagine is, when those consoles come out next year, they're going to be at least 450 to 500. I mean, listen, this one now is already 376, and that's been out for a year at least, and it was an enhancement of a console, not a brand new console. In my opinion, Microsoft will probably be cheaper than PlayStation, because they always generally are. But I doubt we'll see cheaper than 400. Maybe we'll see 450. I don't think they'll push it to higher than that. I think it's going to be an expensive generation, the next one. I think PlayStation will be 450 at least, because there's some pretty, if specs are right, there's some pretty high-end kind of architecture coming in to to these games. So it's we don't know yet what we're going to see or what's coming out. But if they can give you something which is actually playing 4K with decent settings compared to a PC, and it's 500, then it blows this stuff out the water, because you can't compete on that level, And if you have your nice, 50-inch 4K TV playing something at 60 frames per second with, in 4K with decent settings, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I'd be shocked if they managed to pull that off, because to do that on a PC would cost you about $1,500 at least. So to do that on a £500 console would be astounding. But as I said, they do run it at a loss, and because they are making so many of the same units, they can buy things cheaper. But it would be surprising. One other thing actually I didn't mention about this is an option you have to bring the price down of everything on here. So if we get rid of the CPU and we get rid of the RX 580 once it loads, and then we add in an AMD CPU, the Ryzen 3rd Gen. If we add in the, where is it? I don't know why it's got the graphics card there. It's a weird one. Here it is. If we add in this, which is a Ryzen 5, it has an integrated Vega 11 graphics chip in it. So this is actually like a graphics card and a CPU built into one. Now, it's not as powerful, and it won't be playing 1080p at full, but it would be playing 1080p at medium-ish settings, and there you've reduced the price down to less than £500. Again, if you really wanted to cut back, you could buy much cheaper case, cheaper power supply, cheaper motherboard, everything like that. You could potentially even get that as low as 400 if you really wanted to knock things off. Then you're kind of getting more into it. But however, I would say by that point your consoles are looking much better. But it's an option, if you really were like, well, I need something which is gonna, for school work and stuff like that, or for for just work at home maybe, which is going to be able to do the basic functions. I need it for surfing the web. Maybe I want to watch media on it, watch YouTube on it, stuff like that, and also play the odd game on it at relatively medium to low settings, and I'm not that worried about it. Then Bob's your uncle. That will do a great job. So it's worth bearing in mind. Some of the benchmarks have been really impressive for what is like a £140 CPU chip. It's incredibly impressive what they can they you can get out of that. I'm almost tempted to kind of pick it up myself and just like play around with it, overclock it, see what you can actually get from it, because it's AMD just really, I said at the beginning, we live in this great age now because we have this competition where AMD is now right up there with Intel on the CPUs. They are, they're beating Intel at the minute. It has to be said almost. Intel have the, the top end, i9, but the Ryzen 9 is very, very close and at a cheaper price. So, and it comes with a cooler. So, we're getting to a point now where, AMD are almost overtaking Intel. Intel have to fight back, and hopefully AMD can do the same with graphics cards and really challenge those high-end NVIDIA cards, because that will bring the price down, because that's the way they'll have to compete, which is brilliant for consumers. Competition is great for consumers. This is why I always despair when people bemoan the Epic Store or bemoan, the way things like that happen, because at the end of the day, competition is great for consumers. It absolutely is. It's not consumer friendly to have, for one company to have a monopoly over everything, and that's essentially what Steam has had for many years. Monopoly. And I can understand a lot of people's gripes about the Epic Store. Absolutely, it is nowhere near as good as Steam. Steam's had many, many years to get where it is, but also Steam needed a kick up the backside because it was charging too much for the people on the store, and it was getting complacent. It was getting a bit lazy, and it needed to kick up the backside, and Epic's done that. So fair play to them. But yeah, anyway, getting a little bit off track. So when the new consoles come out, I'll definitely do a video or two then comparing like what you can get on PC. It probably won't be pretty. But as I said, if you buy a PC now, you can upgrade it. If you buy a console now, you'll be selling it for peanuts when those new ones come out. So my personal thing, I have a PlayStation 4 Pro. I intend upon playing Death Stranding this year, and then I'll probably sell it. I don't think I'm going to play The Last of Us 2. It hasn't quite resonated with me. The first one didn't either, to be honest with you. I could appreciate it was a good game, but it just didn't hit home for me for whatever reason. So I probably will sell my Pro after Death Stranding just before Christmas, and hopefully make back a couple of hundred on it at least, 250, something like that. And then wait for the new console and just play on PC. The one thing we haven't talked about is Nintendo. Nintendo is like in a different category in my opinion, because Nintendo doesn't offer you value for money like these consoles do in any way, shape or form. We can look up a Nintendo Switch. Oh my god, I can't spell. A Nintendo Switch is like £80 more than the Xbox, or £60 more than the PlayStation. When you get this version, the Lite is obviously 200, but that won't plug in to a TV or do anything like that, so you're stuck with a handheld. And Nintendo has an incredibly expensive ecosystem. Extra controllers are super expensive. Games are currently super expensive, even if you wanted. How much is Breath of the Wild on Nintendo Switch? Breath of the Wild. Okay, how much does it still cost now? Never mind, this is a launch game. It still costs you 50 quid. Like the price doesn't go down on it. I actually had this limited edition one here. Well, I had it. I've sold it, but I did not pay 150 quid for it, so it's actually gone up in money. Should have kept it. Some games go down in price, but the big ones don't. So Nintendo's like a whole ecosystem to itself. Basically, if you love Nintendo games, you'll get a Switch, and that's absolutely fine. You'll have a great time with it. It's a fantastic machine. I very much enjoyed having mine, and I'm probably going to buy another one soon. But if you're looking for value for money, Nintendo is not where it's at right now. You can obviously argue and say enjoyment is, value, is where your value for money is coming from. But like, if you're somebody who's not perhaps into gaming, or wants to be, or tried out or something like that, then I wouldn't recommend going like for Nintendo, unless you really are like, I really love the look of Nintendo games, Mario games, you know, all that sort of stuff, Animal Crossing, Zelda, Mario Kart, you know, that's where I want to be, then give it a go. But yeah, hopefully this has been an interesting enough video for people to kind of have a look at and see how it is. I would love to do a build video one day where I actually, you know, get these parts and then put it all together for you, show you how easy it is to actually put together a PC. I might do one. I'll probably in the next year or so upgrade the CPU on my PC. I'm waiting for prices to go down a little bit on some things. I don't really need to, but when do you ever really need to upgrade? You just want to. So you know, maybe the next year or so, or if there's a really good deal on, then I might pick something up and then rebuild my computer and then kind of show you guys from there, really. But I think there's some really good value to be had in PC gaming right now. The price of RAM as well, I would say, has come down a lot in the last year. You know, that would have 16 gigabytes would have cost you 150 quid a year ago, because there was a shortage of it. So that's come down to a really nice price. And as I said, if you are just looking for great value, that Xbox One, you know, digital at £191 is such good value, and it's a really nice looking machine actually as well. You know, I really like the look of it. The Microsoft controller is my favorite controller in you know, video gaming. A lot of people like the PlayStation one. I'm all about the Microsoft one. The newer version of it that they've done, which is this version. The original ones I didn't like that much actually. They felt a bit flimsy, but these latest ones are really sturdy. They feel a lot nicer in your hands. Lot better quality. The only thing I will say is they don't have rechargeable batteries, but I use mine quite a lot and I don't have to change the batteries that much, so maybe it adds up over the course of a year, I don't know. But yeah, it's a really good good machine, and you get some fantastic games. Minecraft, for example, you know, on the Game Pass is absolutely fantastic, so bear that in mind. So yeah, till next time guys, thank you for watching. I always like to do these little videos just to have a bit of a ramble about stuff. Maybe it helps some people out there somewhere who's been thinking about stuff like this. But till next time, thank you for watching. I'll see you soon. Bye bye.